The stars shimmered coldly above Earth's last free colony, a fragile refuge on the fringe of the galaxy. Humanity's survival had always been precarious, but now it teetered on the edge of annihilation. The Krathal had come in silence, their ships blotting out the sun over the thriving colony of New Horizons. Within hours, they burned it to ash. What truly broke humanity was their cruel precision, targeting schools, parks, and nurseries, ensuring the future of the species was extinguished. They left no survivors under the age of 12. The message was clear. Rebellion would be met with the slaughter of innocents. John Frost Carter stood in the shadowed command center of Epsilon Prime, his broad shoulders stiff, his jaw a hard line. Once a decorated Marine, his eyes now carried the weight of too many defeats. A hologram of New Horizons rotated slowly before him, a ghostly echo of what had been. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of failing machinery. "They didn't just kill the colony," Frost said, his voice low and cold. "They killed the idea that we could outlast them." "We're not outlasting anything," came a sharper voice from across the room. Marcus Sparks Sullivan leaned back in a rusted chair, his boots propped carelessly on the table. The genius inventor was a wiry man with an unkempt beard and eyes that seemed to burn with restless energy. "If we don't make a move soon, they'll finish us off anyway. Might as well take a shot while we still have the tools." Frost turned to him, his brows knitting. "You think this is about tools? They wiped out a colony of 200,000 like it was nothing. What kind of tools do you think will change that equation?" Sparks grinned, a feral thing. "You're thinking like a soldier, Frost. That's your problem. This isn't a war we're going to win with guns and tanks. We're up against a species that outnumbers and outguns us 1,000 to 1. If we're going to survive, we need to hit them in ways they can't predict. And you have a plan, I take it?" Frost said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Not a plan. An idea. We need a symbol. Something to strike fear into their cold, chitinous hearts. Something they won't see coming. I've been working on a concept." Before Frost could respond, a heavy door hissed open, and James Santa Reed strode into the room. At 6.5 feet tall, with a thick beard and a booming laugh that could fill any space, he looked more like a lumberjack than the galaxy's most notorious smuggler. Yet his reputation for slipping past Krathal blockades with impossible cargoes was legendary. He carried a box of contraband rations under one arm and a battered datapad in the other. "Am I interrupting your bickering? Or can we start talking about how to make the bugs regret breathing?" Santa's voice was as jovial as ever, but there was an edge to it now, a steel that hadn't been there before the massacre. "Perfect timing," Sparks said, springing to his feet. He gestured dramatically to a nearby console, where a crude schematic flickered to life. It showed a sleek, heavily modified ship bristling with weaponry. The design was unusual, heavily armored but oddly festive, with its red and white coloring and a reinforced prow shaped vaguely like a sleigh. "Gentlemen, I give you the sleigh of retribution." Frost stared at the image, unblinking. "This is a joke." "No," Sparks said, his grin widening. "It's a strategy. Think about it. The Krathal don't understand us, our culture, our history, our myths. We use that against them. We turn their ignorance into their worst nightmare. You're seriously suggesting we fight the Krathal with a Christmas-themed warship?" Frost's tone was incredulous. "I'm suggesting we fight them with psychological warfare." Sparks shot back. "They see us as inferior, predictable. We flip the script. We take the most innocent, cheerful thing from our culture and weaponize it. Santa Claus becomes the harbinger of their destruction." Santa chuckled, setting down his box. "I like it. We make M scared of a fat old man in a red suit. Poetic." Frost rubbed his temples. "And how exactly does this sleigh bring down an empire?" Sparks tapped the console, bringing up another schematic, a series of drones, small and agile, each one painted like a toy soldier. "We outfit the sleigh with advanced cloaking tech and deploy these little beauties. They'll infiltrate Krathal strongholds, disable defenses, and spread chaos. Meanwhile, we broadcast cryptic messages across their channels. Santa is coming. They won't know what hit them. And what happens when they figure out it's US? Frost asked. That's the beauty of it, Sparks said, his eyes gleaming. They'll waste time and resources trying to make sense of something nonsensical. By the time they realize it's a human ploy, we'll have already struck a dozen more targets. Frost was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the hologram. He hated the idea. It was reckless, borderline insane. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it might be their only chance. The Krathal were methodical, logical. They would never anticipate something so absurd. Fine, he said at last. We'll try it. But if this backfires, it's on you, Sparks. It's going to work, Sparks said confidently. You'll see. Over the next several weeks, the team threw themselves into the project. Sparks and his engineers worked day and night retrofitting an old freighter into the sleigh of retribution. Santa took charge of recruiting a crew, seasoned smugglers and resistance fighters who knew how to think on their feet. Frost coordinated with what remained of humanity's fractured military, securing intelligence on Krathal supply lines and outposts. As the sleigh took shape, so did the legend. They began broadcasting distorted messages to Krathal frequencies. Laughter, jingling bells, cryptic warnings. He sees you when you're sleeping, one transmission declared. He knows when you're awake. The Krathal, unaccustomed to human humor, were baffled. What was this Santa? A warlord? A weapon? A god? The first test of their plan came sooner than expected. A Krathal cruiser entered Epsilon Prime sector, likely searching for signs of resistance. Frost, Sparks, and Santa watched from the command center as the sleigh of retribution launched on its maiden voyage. Cloaked in Sparks's experimental tech, it moved like a ghost, slipping past the cruiser's sensors. Moments later, the holographic feed lit up with chaos. The drones had deployed, sabotaging the Krathal systems and leaving behind glowing images of a bearded man in red. Frost couldn't help but smile grimly as the alien ship erupted in flames. For the first time in years, humanity had struck back. And they weren't done yet. The sleigh of retribution hovered silently in the vast expanse of space, its experimental cloaking field rendering it invisible to all but the most advanced scanners. Inside, the crew prepared for their first real mission, an assault on the Krathal stronghold orbiting Rigel 7. The station was a critical supply hub and prison, rumored to hold hundreds of captured humans. It was the perfect target for their inaugural strike. John Frost Carter stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The glow of the control panels illuminated his stern face as he reviewed the tactical layout on the main screen. His military training told him this mission was madness. Assaulting a fortified Krathal installation with a single ship was suicidal. But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem necessary. "Time to target," he asked, his voice cutting through the tense silence. 5 minutes, replied Marcus Sparks Sullivan from his station. Sparks had an unlit cigar clamped between his teeth, his fingers flying over the controls as he adjusted the drone deployment systems. Cloaking's holding steady. They won't see us until it's too late. James Santa Reed entered the bridge, a wide grin on his face. He carried a heavy case in one hand and a steaming mug of coffee in the other. "Got the payload prepped," he announced. "Our little elves are armed and ready to make some noise." Frost turned to him, his expression unreadable. "This isn't a supply run, Santa. You sure your people can handle combat?" Santa chuckled, setting the case down with a thud. "My people have been dodging Krathal patrols for years. Trust me, they know how to handle themselves." Frost gave a curt nod and turned back to the display. The Krathal station loomed ahead, a massive construct bristling with weapons and shield generators. It was a reminder of the overwhelming power they faced, a power humanity could never hope to match conventionally. "We're not here to match them," Frost muttered to himself, echoing Sparks's earlier words. As the sleigh approached the station, Sparks activated the first wave of drones. Sleek and silent, the machines shot out from hidden compartments, dispersing in all directions. Each one was painted in bright, gaudy colors, red, green, and gold, and shaped to resemble human toys. It was absurd, but that was the point. The Krathal would never understand the symbolism, and confusion was their greatest weapon. Drones are in position, Sparks reported, deploying EMP charges in 3, 2, 1. On the screen, small flashes of light erupted across the station as the drones disabled key systems. The Krat Hall's shields flickered and died, and their external turrets fell silent. Alarms began to blare within the station, though it was clear the aliens had no idea what was happening. Phase 1 complete, Frost said. Santa, your team's up. Santa hefted the case onto his shoulder and headed for the airlock, followed by a dozen crew members armed with an array of improvised weapons. Each carried a device Sparks had affectionately dubbed candy cane blasters, which were essentially high-powered plasma rifles encased in colorful, striped housing. They looked ridiculous, but they were deadly. As the boarding craft launched toward the station, Frost stayed behind to coordinate the assault. Sparks monitored the drones, directing them to disable any remaining defenses and create chaos within the Krat Hall ranks. The aliens were clearly panicking, their movements erratic as they scrambled to respond to the unseen threat. Inside the station, Santa and his team moved quickly. The corridors were dimly lit, the walls covered in the organic, insectoid architecture of the Krat Hall. The air was thick with the acrid scent of alien machinery. Santa's deep voice carried over the comms. "We're in. Encountered light resistance. Seems like your toys are keeping them busy, Sparks." "Told you they'd work," Sparks replied smugly. "Nothing like a little festive mayhem to ruin their day." Santa chuckled and signaled his team to move forward. They passed rows of cells, each one filled with gaunt, hollow-eyed humans. The sight was a grim reminder of what they were fighting for. Santa barked orders, and his crew began freeing the prisoners, handing out basic weapons and directing them toward the boarding craft. "Prisoners secured," Santa reported. "What's next?" "Plant the charges and get out," Frost ordered. "We've got their attention, but we don't want to overstay our welcome." As Santa's team worked, the Krat Hall began to mount a more coordinated response. Alien soldiers poured into the corridors, their chitinous armor glinting in the dim light. The humans fought back fiercely, using the candy cane blasters and explosive ornaments, small, spherical grenades that emitted a shrill, festive jingle before detonating. The absurdity of the weapons only added to the psychological impact on the Krat Hall, who seemed increasingly disoriented and enraged. Santa's booming laugh echoed over the comms as he took down a group of Krat Hall with a well-placed grenade. "You weren't kidding about these ornaments, Sparks. They pack a punch." "Glad you like 'em," Sparks replied. "Now hurry up. We've got movement on the long-range scanners. Looks like reinforcements are on their way." Back on the sleigh, Frost watched the incoming Krat Hall ships with a grim expression. They had planned for this, but the odds were still daunting. He turned to Sparks. "Can we hold them off?" Sparks shrugged. "Depends on how much time Santa needs." The comm crackled to life. "Charges are set," Santa reported. "We're heading back now." The sleigh began to move, positioning itself to cover the boarding craft's retreat. As Santa's team docked, Frost gave the order to detonate the charges. The screen lit up as explosions rippled through the Krat Hall station, tearing it apart from within. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Frost remained focused. The incoming Krat Hall ships were closing fast, their weapons locking onto the sleigh. "Engage the cloaking field," he ordered. The sleigh shimmered and disappeared from view, slipping past the enemy ships like a ghost. By the time the Krat Hall realized what had happened, the humans were long gone. Back aboard the sleigh, Santa clapped Frost on the shoulder, his grin as wide as ever. "Not bad for a first run, huh?" Frost allowed himself a small smile. "We got lucky, but it worked." "It more than worked," Sparks said, joining them. "We just hit the Krat Hall where it hurts, and they didn't even see it coming." As the sleigh made its way back to Epsilon Prime, Frost couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, humanity had struck a blow against the Krat Hall. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and they were just getting warmed up. The Krat Hall flagship loomed on the view screen, a monolithic predator silhouetted against the distant light of a dying star. Its spires of blackened metal seemed to absorb the light, a tangible representation of the darkness the alien empire had cast over humanity. On the bridge of the Sleigh of Retribution, John Frost Carter studied the tactical readouts, his jaw set like granite. This wasn't a raid or an act of defiance. This was an assassination. "This ship's a fortress," Frost said, breaking the tense silence. "If we're going to pull this off, everything has to go perfectly." Marcus Sparks Sullivan swiveled in his chair, a smug grin on his face. "Relax, Frost. We've got surprises they haven't even dreamed of. Let me show you." Sparks tapped a series of commands into his console, bringing up a schematic of the sleigh's latest upgrades. "We've rigged the drones with proximity cloaking fields," he explained. "They'll bypass the Krat-Hull sensors and deliver the payload right to their flagship's central reactor. Meanwhile, our main job is to keep them distracted." "Distracted how?" Frost asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Sparks's grin widened. "Remember the projector tech we salvaged from that Krat-Hull outpost? I tweaked it. Now, instead of hiding us, it'll make us look like a dozen different ships. We'll be a whole damn fleet." James Santa Reed laughed, a deep rumble that filled the room. "I like it. We'll give them something to shoot at while the real fireworks happen." Frost's expression didn't soften. "And if they see through the projections? If the drones fail?" Santa clapped him on the back, his hand heavy and reassuring. "Then we improvise. That's what we do, right? Besides, we've already come this far. You think we're turning back now?" The crew nodded in agreement, their resolve unshaken despite the monumental odds. The sleigh of retribution had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. As the sleigh approached the flagship, the tension on the bridge became palpable. Frost barked orders, Sparks calibrated the projections, and Santa double-checked the payloads. They all knew the stakes. The Krat-Hull flagship wasn't just a military target. It was home to the Supreme Commander, the alien responsible for orchestrating the slaughter of humanity's children. "This one's personal," Santa said, his voice low but steady. "Let's make it count." The first phase of the plan unfolded flawlessly. The sleigh appeared to split into a swarm of identical ships, each one darting and weaving as if preparing for an all-out assault. The Krat-Hull flagship responded as expected, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the empty projections. "They're buying it," Sparks said, his voice tinged with excitement. "Drones are in position. Just a few more seconds." The holographic display showed the drones slipping past the Krat-Hull's defenses, their cloaking fields rendering them invisible. Each one carried a compact but devastating payload of experimental explosives, designed to penetrate even the most advanced armor. But then something changed. Alarms blared across the bridge as the flagship's sensors recalibrated. A Krat-Hull voice, guttural and sharp, echoed through the comms. The aliens had detected the drones. "They've spotted us," Sparks said, his fingers flying over the controls. "They're trying to jam the signal. Can you stop it?" Frost demanded. "I'm trying." The tension was broken by Santa's voice, calm and firm. "We don't need perfect, Sparks. Just close enough." The drones pressed on, but the Krat-Hull countermeasures began taking their toll. Several drones were destroyed, their signals winking out one by one. Frost clenched his fists, his mind racing. They couldn't fail now. Not when they were so close. "Santa," he said, his voice cold and decisive. "Prep a boarding team. If the drones can't finish the job, we will." Santa nodded and strode out of the room, rallying a small group of volunteers. They moved quickly, donning armored suits and arming themselves with Sparks's latest creations. Moments later, the sleigh executed a daring maneuver, skimming dangerously close to the Krat-Hull flagship. A boarding craft launched from its hull, slipping through a narrow gap in the alien ship's defenses. Frost watched the display, his chest tightening as the craft disappeared from view. Inside the flagship, Santa and his team moved like ghosts. The corridors were eerily quiet, the alien architecture twisting and organic. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Krat-Hull soldiers poured into the corridors, their insectoid forms moving with terrifying precision. But Santa's team was prepared. The candy cane blasters roared to life, cutting through the aliens with brutal efficiency. As they fought their way toward the reactor, the Supreme Commander's voice echoed through the ship, its tone mocking and cruel. "Foolish humans, do you think your defiance matters? We will erase you, as we have erased so many others." Santa gritted his teeth, his booming voice rising above the din of battle. "You can try, but you'll never take our spirit." The team reached the reactor room, its core pulsing with an otherworldly light. Sparks's voice crackled over the comms, guiding them through the final steps of arming the explosives. "Place the charges here, here, and here," Sparks instructed. "And make it quick. We've got incoming." As Santa and his team worked, the Krathal forces closed in. The battle was fierce, the humans fighting with a ferocity born of desperation. They knew they wouldn't all make it out, but they also knew the mission was bigger than any one of them. The last charge was set, and Santa signaled the team to fall back. But as they made their way toward the boarding craft, a Krathal warlord appeared, blocking their path. The creature was massive, its chitinous armor glinting in the dim light. It moved with a predatory grace, its claws dripping with venom. Santa stepped forward, his candy cane blaster in one hand and an explosive ornament in the other. "Go," he told the team. "I'll handle this." "Santa," one of the men began, but Santa cut him off. "Now." The team hesitated but obeyed, retreating to the boarding craft. Santa faced the warlord alone, a grim smile on his face. "You've taken enough from us," he said, his voice steady. "Time to give some back." The warlord lunged, and Santa met it head-on. The fight was brutal and short, ending in a blinding explosion as Santa detonated the ornament at point-blank range. On the sleigh, Frost watched the reactor's destruction ripple through the flagship, the explosion consuming the alien vessel. His chest tightened as he realized Santa's boarding craft hadn't made it back. The bridge fell silent, the victory bittersweet. Sparks slumped in his chair, his earlier enthusiasm gone. "He knew," Sparks said quietly. "He knew he wasn't coming back." Frost nodded, his expression grim. "And he did it anyway." The crew stared at the screen as the flagship disintegrated, their emotions a mix of grief and triumph. Humanity had struck a crippling blow against the Krathal, but the cost had been high. As the sleigh turned back toward Epsilon Prime, Frost stood tall, his voice resolute. "We're not done. This is just the beginning." And for the first time in years, they believed him.